Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Small Business USA and Insight CEO, our joint Ask the Expert call today. And on the line, I have my partner in crime, Brian Kerrigan. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Colleen. How you doing?
Doing great. This new format is it's fun, so I can't wait to see what happens. But we have a poll in progress, and we'll talk about that poll at the end. But let's get right into the nitty gritty, Brian, because today we have teams that I think that's a question that you have, right? What could I do if my sales team is better? What can I do to make them better? Is my sales team good enough? So you work hands-on with some of these employers and talking to their sales team. So I cannot wait to see the poll results, but I can't wait to talk to you about this topic because I think it's really important to what our members really want to hear today. So let's just start, Brian. What makes a great salesperson for you?
A great salesperson to me is really someone who can build relationships, who can build long-term relationships. I think a lot of salespeople can make a sale, but they have difficulty in creating lifelong relationships that lead to more sales and leads to referrals and things of that nature. So, to me, a great salesperson is a great relationship person. They're a great listener. They're a great problem solver. They focus less on their product or service and more on what their customer needs. So as they're evaluating whether a prospect is right for them, they're listening as opposed to talking, and they're really understanding, well, where is the pain, where's the problem, and how can my solution help? And that, to me, is a much better way to sell than sort of kind of ramming the features and benefits of what you do down someone's throat.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to really kind of dig in and say, how do you know if your sales team is good enough? So let's just start. Maybe how do you evaluate your sales force, Brian?
Well, I've got a number of questions that I ask myself when I'm evaluating my sales force. First, I want to understand whether my team is customer centric. So I don't want to be sales centric. I want to be customer centric. I also want to know if my team is focused on the long term as opposed to the short term. So in sales, it's very easy to forget about the customer. It's very easy to change your focus from short-term sale to long-term pain. I want my team I want them thinking about customers, putting customers first. I want them focused on the long term. I want them collaborative with each other. Sales can sometimes be a cutthroat game where you have team members who are going against each other rather than working together. And in a perfect world, you want your team to be collaborative, and you want to find ways to reward collaboration. And obviously the main thing in those three things, are you customer centric, are you focused on long term, are you collaborative, that's something that you have to feel out with your sales team. You need to be talking to your sales team and your sales manager on a regular basis to sort of take their temperature and get a feel for these things that aren't necessarily measurable by some objective metric. But then obviously we want to look at objective metrics too. Are you meeting your sales goals? Are you having enough sales conversations? Are you closing a high enough percentage of your sales? So there's sort of the qualitative measurement of the team and looking at whether you're customer-centric, long-term, and collaborative. But then there's the quantitative measures that you have to look at as to whether you're making enough sales, whether you're having enough sales conversations, and whether you're closing enough sales.
Yeah, well said. I think there's this challenge that we hear often with business owners that say, especially those business owners that started their business and now they have that sales force, maybe 3 or 4, sometimes 25 people on their sales team. And they said, I just need to go and show these guys how it's done. And I think one of the biggest challenges that a business owner can have is comparing their sales team to them, to yourself, when you started your business. So many different reasons why. But so I think it's, the business has changed. People lead and drive sales differently. There's some people who have a longer ramp-up period, but boy, they'll rake those clients in nonstop once they build that relationship and get into their groove. And then there's other people who are just really strong out of the gate. So let's talk a minute, Brian, maybe about how do you measure productivity? I mean, are there tools in place that you're using with these teams that really makes a difference?
Well, there's two ways that I look at productivity. I look at activity-based productivity, and I look at results-based productivity. So activity-based productivity is effectively, are you having enough sales? Are you following up on your leads? If you're following up on your leads, are you having sales conversations? Are you making, if you're a cold call company, are you making enough phone calls? Are you sending enough emails? That stuff is all activity-based, and the sales team can report that activity back to the sales manager or to the owner of the business, and you can get a good feel for whether people are doing the activities that they need to do to be successful. But then you also have to measure productivity and sales by results. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't count until you make a sale to an existing customer or a new customer. So we have to measure things such as, okay, you followed up on leads, but did you get a sales conversation? Did you move them further down the funnel? Once you got a sales conversation, did you get a meeting? Okay, now you got a meeting, did you get a sale? So there's a process of moving them down the sales funnel that you have to measure as well. And one of the things that I talk about often is if you have good activity and you're not getting good results, well, there's an opportunity for training right there, or there's someone who is maybe not cut out to do the job because they're clearly doing everything that you're asking them to do, but they're not getting the results that you're hoping for. And obviously you have to give them enough time. To your point, Colleen, some people ramp up really quick, others don't ramp up as quick, but eventually become real stars if you give them the opportunity. So you don't want to give up on your salespeople too quickly if they're doing the activities that they're supposed to be doing. But at the same time, if you're seeing a long-term pattern of activity with no results, then that's something to be concerned about.
I'm just going to toot your own horn for a little bit, because I think some of the things that you're doing with the marketing program, with the peer advisory boards and CEO roundtables is really cool. But as you go in with these teams, I think it's what you're doing and what our program does to really kind of start with, hey, here's your goal and vision, and let's make sure your entire team is aligned in goals, visions, know where you're going, and the communication is really clear all the way through from the top down in your organization. And then making sure that no matter how the sales team goes about getting there, they're still all going after the same thing and ultimately have the same message. Because I think individuality is what makes sales, that authenticity, individuality is what really makes a salesperson great. And I think you're really good at drawing it out with some of these teams. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can personally, from my experience, as a small business owner, when we first started Small Business USA, Brian was really that person for me who said, you're too close. Nobody's going to sell like you, Colleen. You're too close. You need to look at the sales team for who they are and what they are. And you can't give them the answer. You have to help them find their own answers and just see the bigger vision. So I want to talk a little bit about, we often see teams, especially in environments where there's less than 100 employees, we often see teams that are either over-managed or over-led. Can you give me your opinion on that? Kind of share with us a little?
Yeah, I mean, over-management is usually a function of having too many metrics and really detail analyzing the metrics and really relying on that solely to manage your people, as opposed to leading your people, where your goal is to basically give them that vision, to align their activities with that vision, to put a plan together, and then to let them execute the plan. So a leader likes to basically control the vision and control the process of defining the plan for the individual, and then they let the salesperson execute the plan. Whereas someone who overmanages wants to meddle in the process of execution as well. And I've always found, in the business world that the most successful people are the people who you delegate to and take that delegation and run with it. Not everyone's going to do that. And that's the challenge as a small business owner, of knowing who to delegate to and who not to delegate to. But there's a trust factor that once you build up the trust with your sales force, you got to kind of let them do what they do, and at the same time be communicating your vision so that they're aligned with the company goals.
So Brian, give us an example. How do you motivate your team? You have a pretty big team that you're managing. How do you motivate them?
Well, there's different ways to motivate them. I mean, one of the, obviously comp is an issue when you're talking about motivation. With salespeople, you're talking about, a lot of times a portion of their comp being commission based. So if you're probably going to have some comp that's tied to individual performance. But I also like to have comp that's tied to team performance, because I want to encourage my team to be collaborative and to work together. If you don't have any of your comp tied to team performance, then you have the potential of having a bunch of people running around doing their own thing. You've got to provide support to them during the sales process. Sales is a tough game. You're gonna have good days. You're gonna have bad days. You got to be there on the bad days to provide encouragement to keep them moving forward. On the good days, you want to be able to kind of celebrate those good days with them and provide them the praise that they deserve. And one of the bigger tools of motivating a sales team is, to the extent that you can, promote from within. If you're, instead of looking outside the organization for the answer, maybe the answer for your new sales manager is within the organization. Someone who you already know, who you already trust, who's already aligned with your goals. So promoting from within is a great way to help motivate a sales team.
I think I think there's a great point that you made, because everyone is motivated a little differently, right? There's those salespeople who are completely motivated by competition. They want to know exactly where they stand. And those are your favorite, right? Because they're just the better your team gets, the better they're going to get. They just have to be on the top. But just communicating where they are and how to get there is so important. But you touched on so many different pieces in there. And I think business owners, it's such a great point, Brian. People need to just step back and really think about, what does that person need from you, and have a bunch of different tools in your arsenal. So you work a lot. So for anybody who doesn't know, InsightCEO it's Small Business USA, but for larger companies, a little bit larger company. And it's CEO roundtables. There's still around non-disclosure agreements and board participation. So it's really about these collision of ideas and brainstorming and problem solving and really a discrete venue that you can share really what's holding you back. But another piece that InsightCEO offers is that we take our marketing program and integrate it with your sales team. So a lot of the businesses in InsightCEO will have sales managers that work for them. And Brian, I know that you've worked with a lot of sales managers, good and bad. And I want to just take a minute and ask you, how do you know if you have a good sales manager or not? I mean, it's a piece that you can't micromanage when you have a business with 25 or 50 employees, but it's the most important piece of your business. So how do you know if you have a great sales manager?
Well, I think you have to look at some different things. Again, quantitatively and qualitatively. Quantitatively, you potentially have a good sales manager. If you're seeing good sales growth from your existing clients, you're getting new prospects. You're winning with new prospects. Your sales team is motivated. So those are the quantitative things that you look at are basically the same things that you look at when you're evaluating individual salespeople. You're looking at, which way is sales going? If sales is going up, that's evidence that I have a good sales manager. That's not necessarily the answer. But then you have to think about, obviously, morale. What's the morale of the sales team? If your sales are going up, but your sales team is turning over and key salespeople are turning over, then that probably means that you don't have a very good sales manager. He's somewhat good at hiring in terms of bringing in talent, but at the end of the day, he's not really good at sort of distilling that talent, cultivating that talent, so that people stay with the organization and are proud to be part of the organization. So, you have to look at the objective metrics, but then you also have to look at morale, teamwork, those things that really you can only evaluate when you sit down with the sales manager's direct reports and take their temperature of the organization.
Great point. I'll share a story. There was, an electronics retailer, and they had a new sales manager in, and this sales manager just killed it. I mean, sales were through the roof, extended protection plans through the roof. I mean, it was just really out of the gate, this sales manager perceivably was making a big difference. But then fast forward 2 months later, they started looking at their total sales line. And even though sales were happening, there were a lot of returns. There was a lack of repeat sales. They had turnover. So those were all indicators that there was a problem somewhere in this wheel, even though the sales had increased. At the end, with the balance sheet, there was way too many returns. They were selling the wrong things. They were pushing the product out the door instead of doing what's right. So it's a great example of, sometimes results take a little bit longer to kind of show up, or you'll make the sale, but then you won't see that customer come back. So there's that piece of finding that balance, because really, we talk about the sales funnel a lot, and it's about how you start your conversation and bring them in and make the sale. But then at the bottom of the sales funnel, remember, it's almost a funnel. It really should be hourglass shaped. And it really should, that's where you have repeat business and you have referrals. And that piece, that bottom piece, is almost more important than the top piece of your sales funnel. And I think sometimes you'll see with a sales manager who isn't great, the bottom of the funnel, where it should turn into an hourglass, erodes. And it really hurts that brand and the reputation of your business. So sometimes it's not just about that top line sales, it's about what you see after. So it's important. So how do you manage that salesperson? How do you make sure that they're representing the right brand to your consumer and out in the universe? Do you have any tricks on that, Brian?
Well, you mean the sales manager himself or herself?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think part of it obviously is I'm going to do some interaction with that sales manager. So if that sales manager is going out to meet a client, I'm going to sit in on some of those meetings. I'm going to make sure that the message coming from him or her is the message that I want to send to the world, and that we've agreed on as the message that we're going to send to the world. So part of it is I'm going to sit in on some of the meetings with the sales manager to make sure that they're conveying the vision that I have. I'm going to sit in on some of the sales meetings between the sales manager and the sales staff to make sure that the sales manager is communicating to the sales staff what I want to communicate, and all cohesively are communicating to the world what we want to communicate. And then from there, I'm obviously going to do, one of the things that I like to do is I'm going to have my sales staff review my sales manager, formally or informally, and I'm going to get feedback from them on how the sales manager is doing, how he is at conveying the vision, how he is at measuring results, and how they are at building a team, a long-term focused team. So I think to your point, just to digress a minute, Colleen, I think when you get the sales manager that's too short-term focused, it's going to hurt your business. The easiest way to drive sales is to drive sales to existing customers who you already have great relationships with. So part of your story related to the electronic stores, they weren't building relationships, they were pushing product.
Right. Good. Hey, I have a question that came in from someone who, and I love this question because I've had this question myself. So it's somebody who couldn't be on the call with us today. But the question, Brian, is what would you do with a salesperson who is great at building your brand and talking about your message and celebrating your company? However, they struggle to make a sale. Do you keep them or do you kick them to the curb?
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, we have to know a little bit more about how long this has been going on. This is kind of the activity not aligning with results. So I think part of the analysis that you have to go through as a business owner is, can I correct sort of what's going wrong from a results perspective with more training? And am I willing to invest that time and money and energy into that person? The answer may be no. I mean, sales isn't for everybody. Some people have more of the marketing gene in them, where they know the message, they're able to communicate the message, but for some reason they don't have the finesse when it comes to asking for the sale and getting new business. Sometimes they're just plain uncomfortable with that proposition that at some point you're going to have to ask for the business. So in some ways training may help. In other ways, sometimes you just have to make the determination that the person's not cut out for sales. But if they're really good brand ambassadors for you, maybe you think about a different role in the organization for them.
I love that. Great advice, Brian. It brought to mind sometimes a salesperson just isn't the right salesperson for your company. They might believe in your business and your company, but, it's like, I don't know. The only thing that comes to mind is if Brian was trying to sell lingerie, you're a great salesperson, but I can't imagine buying lingerie from you, right? And sometimes you have people who are really used to working with giant companies and big companies that just can't sell to a small business owner. There is a right salesperson for every piece of your business, right? And
there is. Like, for me personally, I'm more in the B2B world. I've always been in the B2B world. I'm comfortable in the B2B world. If I was to all of a sudden go into the B2C world and try to sell there, there'd be a very steep learning curve for me.
Mm-hmm. So I love Salesforce said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love that. Because for me, it's all about the why, right? I think when the why sells, with Simon Sinek all over the airways saying it's about your why. If you have a strong why, your product sells itself. But I also think a strong culture can make or break your company, and people don't necessarily relate the culture within your building to your sales results from your sales team. Do you want to weigh in on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally people who are happier, who are in a place where they're comfortable with the vision and their goals are aligned with the company's goals, and they're overall satisfied that the company is going in a direction that they want to go in, they're going to be more likely to be successful. There's going to be a better culture when you have everybody, not everybody, because you can't ever have everybody, but when you have 90% of your workforce buying into your message and really helping you, in some ways helping you create that message. So part of the process of having good culture is stepping back and letting your employees have good input. If they have good input and they feel like they've had a role in creating the plan and that their values are reflected in what the company is trying to do, you're more likely going to have a good culture, and it's more likely that you're going to have a good sales team and you're going to have an exploding sales line, because you've got people who really deeply to their core believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, so true. I think that's what's really cool about InsightCEO is as we integrate the training and marketing, sales and marketing program into your business for you, we have that opportunity to have those conversations with sales managers and sales people that help us hear, where is your culture? Where are the misalignments? So it gives us an opportunity to say, we're going to go and integrate this training program for your sales team, and we're going to have monthly masterminds with your sales team. But it's also going to allow us the opportunity to hear things and see things that you don't have privy to. You know, there's this great statistic that came out. It's a horrifying statistic that came out, but it's a great statistic. They polled 40,000 Americans, and they found that of 40,000 Americans, 93% of them would lie to their friend or boss if they thought they had a bad idea, because they wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. They would somehow avoid the truth or just blatantly lie just so they wouldn't hurt their bosses or their friends' feelings. And I think about that with the sales team. Sometimes, you know, the boss got a lot going on, and they don't want to hear the quibbles from the sales team or why they can't do it. And sometimes it creates that culture gap. And it's kind of nice with InsightCEO that we have the ability to just kind of walk in there and get a fresh perspective and share that with the CEO and help bridge that gap and help kind of change that culture with you as part of the team. Because let's face it, sales is the most important thing we do, right? Without sales, it hides most of your problems. It helps you grow. It gives you money to solve other problems that you might have. So it's a pretty important piece of the puzzle here. Hey, Brian, internal or external sales teams?
I'm a bigger believer in the internal sales team. I think they're more vested in the success of the company than the external sales team. You know, that's not to say some organizations are built in a way that they need to have external reps. You know, whether it be because of geographic location and they don't have the ability to visit customers on a regular basis. So there are some companies, a lot of manufacturers have reps across the country, and they work with reputable reps who are able to carry out sort of their vision for marketing. But I still feel like there's an element of your brand that you let go when someone else has the control over the sales process. So, you know, to the extent I can, I like to keep my sales internal. I like the people reporting to me. I like to have input into what they're saying about the brand in the marketplace. I like to be able to evaluate what they're saying in the marketplace.
That's awesome. Hey, Brian, it's kind of interesting because I'm getting some texts that are coming in, and this is the first time we've used this format, which is really this beautiful, easy format. So I'm glad that we can switch to this, and it's easier for the guests. And Brian had to call in today, but usually we'll have somebody else's face up here with us. But it's I'm kind of getting some texts here that, you know, people are a little intimidated by Zoom. You just push that link and get on there, and it's really not that hard. But we're getting some questions in, so through email, or through text. So I just want to share some of these questions with you, Brian. So
Okay.
One of the questions is, how often should you go out and sell with your team?
Well, part of it depends on what you sell. And I don't want that to be a cop-out answer, but you're not going to send 5 people to sell a $100 widget. So you're going to look for opportunities with your bigger accounts to go out there. And part of what you're doing is not only are you evaluating the sales manager, you're continuing to build your relationship with the client. So, you know, there's two different levels of relationship with that client or customer. There's the relationship with the sales manager, salesperson, but there's also that relationship with the CEO, and sometimes that CEO relationship predates the sales relationship. So it's very important for the CEO to be out with the bigger customers on a regular basis. I would say at a minimum with your bigger customers, you got to get out there at least twice a year and see them, listen to their feedback, kind of get their feel for where the industry is going and what's happening. And so part of this, from your perspective, is evaluating the sales manager and the sales team. But part of it's also evaluating your operations and how well you're delivering on what you need, what you're promising. And then part of it is effectively building your pipeline, because you're continuing to build that relationship.
Hey, Brian, the next question is, thanks for that answer. It's a great answer. Totally agree. How often should you hold a sales meeting? Oh, I love this question because it's a little, I can't wait to hear your answer.
Yeah, I tend to be monthly. I think weekly is too much. I don't think enough happens in a week. There's necessarily enough change within the brand or the delivery structure or anything of that nature that's going to justify a weekly meeting. I tend to be monthly, bring the whole sales team in, sales managers, sales supervisors, sales associates, bring everybody in and talk about, what's going on from a marketing perspective, what's going on from a leads perspective, how we can do a better job of following up on leads, how do we manage best practices, what's fixture. I like to have people share their successes and sometimes their failures if there's something that we can learn from, because we're all going to fail at one point or another. So I tend to go monthly. I mean, my recommendation would go monthly or quarterly, to kind of give you enough time in between meetings to evaluate what's happening. If you're a larger organization, a month of activity can provide you with a lot of data. If you're a smaller company, well, then maybe you need 3 months of data to provide you with a quarterly sales meeting that's meaningful. So I think you have to gauge it based on the amount of data that you have in the trends in your organization.
Hey, I'm going to disagree just a smidge on this one. And I think that's a B2B and B2C type of response, right? But I think that I agree that there should be a formal sales meeting or formal, if it's a conference call or structured. But I think when you're in that B2C, if you're a retailer and your salespeople are on commission, motivation is really, really important. Keeping them abreast of what's new. I think it should be frequent and fast, because you want your team out there. But I think there's some value in, there's always going to be those people that are just superstars, right? And that gets old and exhausting every time you get on the call and you go, hey, congratulations, Brian Kerrigan. He's our lead for the month. But I think sometimes when you have, when people are selling smaller things and you have a more hands-on sales team, depending on what you're selling, I think you have to gauge your team. So if your team is younger and, you feel like you're herding cats pretty often, I think there's probably a need to go weekly or every other week and make them shorter and more impactful. But that way, because Brian isn't going to be this lead generator every single week, but he's going to always probably be the lead generator every month. So that way you can say, oh my God, Colleen beat Brian this week, and you're going to have some fun and motivate. But I also think it depends on what you're selling. It depends on your sales team. It depends who they are. Women tend to want to communicate. So if you're in an MLM, and, I happen to have a few businesses that they're MLMs, they're members with us, and that weekly sales meeting, they're selling products. They want stories, they're moving, they're very communicative. So I think really you have to look at your team. I don't know if there's a cookie cutter answer, but I think in general, once a month, being structured and planful and reviewing goals. I'm just going to also make sure there's this other piece, because I've led sales teams for a long time, you guys, and in a whole bunch of different environments. A sales meeting can never negate the one-on-one sales coaching and time that you spend with your team. So if you have 5 members of your sales team and you have a sales manager, that sales manager should be checking in with them every single week. Just even if it's just to let them know that they're there and let them know to support. But there's that one-on-one coaching, and that's so valuable to let them know that because again, that person who is competitive but is never going to beat Brian Kerrigan, you can easily lose them if you don't have that way to give them that recognition. And not everybody likes to be recognized in a real public way either. So knowing how that person likes to be recognized and celebrated is also important. Kind of leads to the end, and I want to wrap up with how do you celebrate? How do you keep momentum going? Because I think that's one of the most challenging things you can do with a sales team. You have some great momentum, and there's competition is always changing. We see this often that teams start flying and doing great, and then the rest of the team said, "Oh, good, we don't have to worry about the sales team anymore." So, how do you keep momentum going so it doesn't stagnate or dry up, or you don't lose sight of what's important?
Well, I think some of that is when we talked earlier about activity-based measuring. So, one of the natural instincts for people is if they have a good month to sort of let down the next month. So one of the things that you have to look for as a sales manager is if someone has a good month, you got to make sure that their activity levels are still high in the following month, and that their sales conversations are still high in the following month, and that their sales closings are high in the following month. Because there's that natural instinct to just say, okay, well, I made my goal for the quarter. I really don't need to do anything else at this point. Well, the reality is we want to help motivate our people to achieve more and more, rather than be satisfied with achieving their quarterly goals. Let's break the quarterly goal. But, when you start to see that a person who has some success, you've got to make sure that they're focused on the long term and building on that success rather than just dwelling on that success.
Great call. And I love that you mentioned breaking up the goals. Awesome stuff in this call, Brian. Thank you so much for being on. And I love what you're doing with teams out there, and you're really making a difference with a lot of our business owners and CEOs. So thank you so much, Brian, for all you do.
All right. Thank you, Colleen.
All right. Thanks. For anybody interested to see how we, Brian, InsightCEO or Small Business USA can help your business, you can visit InsightCEO. That's where we're going to really work directly with you and your sales teams. That's at InsightCEO.com. And as always, smallbusinessus.com is there for your for the smaller businesses under 25 employees. So I look forward to talking to you all and hearing from you and hearing some great sales stories. And Brian, thank you so much for always giving us great insight. Have a great day, everyone.
All right.
Your success.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.